I'm gonna rush.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna wait for the 1 minute that we have. I thought we were more
no.
food for us, right?
I'm being hopeful.
Yes, I appreciate that, but also, I come from a tradition that says each person is a whole world. So you're teaching to multiple worlds right here.
Right.
And
We're streaming too, right?
So timely and so important. And people may, as you suggest, slowly come in. I will, since we are few and I know everyone so well in this room, I will do my usual Humanities Center song and dance, except to say that we will have, we're very grateful that you're here and I'm introducing you. But I will say we have 2 more of these faculty works in progress sessions left, and both are a little bit special, and I hope that you will help encourage other people to come and promote these occasions. The next one is on Monday, April 8th at this time with all this yummy food. I think people should come for food alone, chance to come upstairs and get fed and learn and, but it's a busy time of year. But the next one is the last of the presentations of the faculty fellows from this year's World Making, World Building. And that is, under Regine's auspices. Patrice Collins, Denise Kaur, and Sarah Riccardi Swartz will each talk a little bit about their research. And those have been really wonderful. And it's wonderful to get an insight into the Faculty Fellows Program, which is a signature program of the Humanities Center. We have new fellows chosen for next year. You'll see an announcement soon. It's a great list on the theme of erasures. And there's always a culminating event for the fellows. This year it will be April 11th. Aisha, do you remember what time that event is? But the important thing to say is that the speaker is Sadia Hartman, who is a leading theorist and scholar. And I know we'll have attendance for that, but I would just encourage you to get that word out. And the final of the presentations in this series is a colleague from our Oakland campus. And that will be on Tuesday, April 9th. So they're back-to-back days. Her name is Susan Ito. It's a little out of the box, but for works in progress, she's going to speak on her new book, which I'm holding in my hands, I Would Meet You Anywhere, which has gotten a lot of attention and won serious awards. It's a memoir, and it's a memoir about adoption. So, and it's really a hot topic. So again, just, encourage you to, when you get these flyers, forward them to your colleagues, to people who would be interested, help us get the word out. And Kostas, will you please do the honor of introducing our colleague who I'm very excited to learn from.
With pleasure. Let me welcome you all and welcome those of us on the Zoom. Wish you a happy Greek Independence Day for those of you who are celebrating. It may not be obvious, but I'm in my final trimester of being chair, that is. So those of you who have been chairs know that it's really the worst job in the world, a thankless position, but every once in a while you get a chance to do something good, something great. And one of the greatest things that I was able to do with my colleagues in political sciences chair is to hire Briony Swire-Thompson, who will be speaking to us today, to join us as a assistant professor of political science with a joint appointment in psychology at the College of Science. Her work is truly remarkable and is so cutting edge in so many different respects and has shed so much light on so many important topics, everything from fighting misinformation in the political space, in the science space, with cancer and disease and health and all of that. And it's so important for this point in time. She directs our Psychology of Misinformation Lab and is also a faculty affiliate at the Network Science Institute, where she did a postdoc and subsequently worked as a research scientist. Her research investigates why people believe in misinformation, why they share it online, and how it can be corrected to foster belief change. She got her PhD from the University of Western Australia and was also a postdoc at MIT before coming to Northeastern on a Fulbright scholarship. We were really thrilled when she decided to join us, and she is partly funded currently by the National Cancer Institute to study cancer misinformation in particular. So today she's going to talk to us a little bit about that work, the psychology of misinformation, which is also, if I'm not mistaken, the title of a brand new course that you developed, an undergraduate course that will be offered joint cross-listed between political science and psychology. So Briony, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking to small groups so I can really kind of explain my research. I can see that it's a political science dominant crowd today. Can I ask what other disciplines are in the room so I know how to pitch?
Sociology.
Sociology, okay, excellent.
I do business development for the college.
Okay.
And I'm in English.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, excellent. As Costas mentioned, I've been at Northeastern for around 6 years. First a postdoc, then a research scientist, and I was so delighted. I guess in September was my first, when I started in the political science department as an assistant professor. So I thought today I would do a little bit of a tapas plate, if you will, about some of my research. So I'm going to be first describing misinformation in terms of the source, like who's providing you this misinformation. And then I'm going to be followed up by like the individual, focusing a little bit on memory, like people's memories for what's true and false. And then if we get time, I don't think we will, but I'll like do a little bit, potentially a little bit about the difficulties of measuring things. Like I do look at this from a scientific perspective, particularly an experimental perspective, and you're measuring something really weird and squishy. You're measuring belief, and that's got its challenges as well. So I might dip my toe into that. If not, feel free to ask me about any other time, but at the very least, I think we'll get to the first two. So the first kind of section is what I actually mentioned I'd be talking about today, which is discrediting health disinformation sources. So this is very much my kind of the research that's funded by the National Cancer Institute. So one reason that health misinformation in particular really thrives are these huge financial incentives, unlike other areas of misinformation. Some do, some don't. But we do know that things like the alternative medicine industry is worth, 100 billion, and there's a lot of vested interest in this field in order to spread misinformation online. There are these really,
Is it okay to interrupt you with questions?
Please.
I didn't mean to interrupt so quickly, but could you just explain to us how you think of misinformation, maybe separate from disinformation?
Absolutely.
Get that just to set the
I love
ground.
them. Yes. I think next slide. But essentially, so misinformation, we consider it to be a real umbrella term. It's like any piece of information that is false. It can be intentional or not. But disinformation really is the kind where someone intends to deceive. So these, in the case of cancer, we often think of them like these more classical snake oil salesmen, these people that are trying to sell vulnerable populations, these like treatments or just eat kale or some kind of culture. But really, disinformation can be any individual. It's traditionally really hard to study because you never know the internal intent of somebody. So the only way I have managed to kind of study this is, I'll get into it in a minute, but like we created these kind of fictitious scenarios where we have an individual who we know because we invented them, that they're intending to deceive the 99 times out of 100, I just use the umbrella. I look at misinformation because it's just too hard to know what someone's intending. But yeah, so this first project is that kind of more dubious source, this disinformation source. Yes, good question. So regarding the consequences of cancer misinformation in particular, It's quite severe compared to others. This is actually what turned me. I read a colleague of mine's, welcome. I read a colleague of mine's paper, and it is literally what turned me to cancer misinformation. I was like, this is actual measurable, terrible consequences. So this is Skylar Johnson's work. He's an oncologist who I now work with very closely. He found that people who use alternative cancer therapies have a mortality risk of more than double of those who use evidence-based treatment. So you can see here conventional treatment. This is survival fraction. And you can see here this orange line over I think a 5-year period, people who use conventional treatment in the orange, meanwhile people in the blue using alternative medicine very sadly have a higher mortality rate. So this is a very clear example how a belief in particular in misinformation can really impact people's health and even mortality in this case. So one thing that I asked was, how do you discredit these sources? How do you steer people back towards evidence-based medicine? A lot of my work is on the kind of correction side of things. I have many colleagues who are on what's called like inoculation or the literacy, or they're trying to like educate people before you get to the misinformation. A lot of my stuff is all on the other end. What happens when people already believe in it? What do you do then? What do you do next? So in this particular case, I was like, can we discredit a source? Does that work? So essentially,
Is it not, Abhishek?
it's working.
It's not working?
Oh, here we go.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay, good.
It's catching up with you.
It's catching up. So in these series of experiments, I used both cancer and vaccines as the kind of world we're in terms of these sources. So in a couple of interventions, I decided to pit against each other. There was one correcting this disinformation, saying, hey, these people are saying all these inaccurate things. What do you believe now? Or saying like, they don't have the expertise and able to give you the good information. That's a very different kind of intervention you've got there. Both, will they have a cumulative effect? Can you just like pile them on? Like, does that help even more? Or highlighting conflicts of interest, saying they actually have a conflict of interest here. Maybe they're getting funds from either a patent or a side project, or there's some kind of financial incentive commonly. So highlighting this. I was a bit worried that if this one worked the most, actually hypothesized that would be the strongest. But also concerned because not everyone has a conflict of interest in this world. Meanwhile, it's very common that someone spreads inaccurate information and they don't have the expertise in this world. So essentially I had, questions are welcome. I had 300 people in this particular study recruited from, it's a platform called Prolific, which is just, it's an online platform where you can get participants and you can pay them. It's wonderful if anyone wants to know how to use this. I love teaching this. It's really helpful to get participants, and you can get representative samples with the click of a button, which is just so wonderful. And they've opened up a new partisanship, one where you can get, it used to be just race, sex, and ethnicity representative sample. Now they've launched their new one where you can get partisanship as well, which political interests are particularly valuable, which I cannot wait to use. So essentially I presented people with this.
Briony?
Yeah.
Is it just one nation or is it international?
I just focused on the US in this case. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I presented this vignette, this little story to participants first, presenting a source that seemed very credible. What was so fun was I did a lot of research into how these disinformation sources actually sell themselves. And they do have a quite common recipe. They really use the kind of traditional credibility markers of a reputable source. They're like, I was trained here from this university with this degree. They often show themselves in a white lab coat. It's really quite remarkable. So we presented here Dr. George Davis, which from there, very reputable, a lecturer and researcher in integrative oncology and has a PhD from Berkeley. This was really common. And then I did find out from my partner who does have a PhD from Berkeley that they don't even have a medical center. They have no one, but it's really common. It's astounding.
Make that up.
They just make it up, absolutely. And so this is what I kind of based it on. So he got a little diploma there, and I'm going to give him a hat to really show how credible he is. And then we had this pre-test source credibility kind of scale where we said, how experienced do you think they are? How reputable, how expert, how sincere? Traditionally, there are like two dimensions in cross-course source credibility. There's like this trustworthiness element, which is like how much you believe someone is willing to give you the accurate information, versus this expertise element, like how much they're qualified to give you the good information. So we tested them, and everyone should be really kind of enthusiastic about this source. They're going to catch up on me again. Okay. All right. So the three conditions in the first experiment are correcting disinformation, where I said, yes, highlight all the inaccurate statements. I say, Dr. Davis has said in the past that fluoride in water can increase your likelihood of developing cancer. This is false. For all of these reasons, I give really reputable sources. I say, according to the NIH or the National Cancer Institute. By contrast, the low expertise condition was saying they're actually not qualified to give you this this advice. They might have a PhD, but it was in anthropology. They might have a PhD, but it was in communications. And this is really, really popular. They often are affiliated with these universities, but they just have no training that actually qualifies them to give medical advice. The control condition was things like, they're a photographer. They like cooking, they like running. So they read a little story as well, but this had none of the kind of the intervention that you would expect from the other two. Then we had our measure of disinformation belief. This is one kind of example here saying, well, now they're now telling you more things. They're saying that eating sugar causes cancer to grow and spread more quickly, which is false. It's like this new disinformation. And what our measure, one of our main measures is how much do people believe or trust the source for this new information that is all wrong, that is all inaccurate. It's the new disinformation. What do they think now? And we also wanted to see the impact of their credibility. Like, does this actually reduce their credibility as well? The final thing I wanted to bring up is this measure, really like fun measure I had, which is like called the complementary and alternative medicine belief inventory, just to see if individuals who already hold these complementary and alternative beliefs are more likely to believe in the disinformation, and are they less likely to reduce once they're being exposed to these interventions. I'm quickly going to introduce experiment 2 because it's exactly the same, but I added the combined. I added those the two together, where we're both correcting the disinformation and highlighting this low expertise. So that was like the big change here. So it was 600 individuals. And essentially there were like several hypotheses. I obviously thought that correcting disinformation would work best on this like belief, on this disinformation belief. And I thought highlighting low expertise might work best for reducing the source credibility. And yes, I mentioned my hypothesis about people high on this can-be scale, this complementary and belief inventory scale. Would be more likely to believe in this. Essentially what I found was, this is here. So essentially the way you can read a lot of these are the higher on the scale, the more people are believing in the disinformation. So higher is bad, is essentially the way you want to read. You've got a control condition here. So this is like how much after they think, Dr. Davis, he's doing lots of running and cooking and swimming, I think. So yeah, they're like, okay, this is, I still believe in the stuff that they're saying. And what we found was like both correcting disinformation and highlighting low expertise equally reduced belief, which was actually really great because it could just mean like, at least for study 1, the recommendation was to health practitioners, doesn't matter what you do, go for it. Like, it's all working. That's a good sign. Then the question became like, would there be an additive effect here for the combined condition of experiment 2? So what we found here No, here it is in the purple. It was exactly the same as the other two. So again, combining it didn't really help. But at the very least, again, everything worked, and that was like really
Not enough.
not enough. No, not enough. Not enough. Good point. And really, for trying to find out who isn't reducing is like a real kind of goal as well. Can we get those people who aren't? Because you can just see like, yeah, there's a lot of individuals who are holding out on us. In terms of source credibility, what we found was here we've got what's really nice. We have the pre-post here, so you can see like at the beginning this little kind of story about. I think we had Dr. Smith versus Dr. Davis. I can't remember. We had so we changed between experiment 1 and 2. They were all really. They thought that the source was all really reputable, which is super. In the control, obviously, we got like, it was like no difference. And then correcting disinformation. There was a huge reduction, but not as much as the blue line there for highlighting low expertise. So what I would recommend here is like, if you're gonna do one, you might as well highlight low expertise. That's really boosting it for that source credibility dimension. For combined in experiment 2, we did find an extra little boost. It's not much below highlighting low expertise alone. We do find like a little reduction. Small but significant reduction if you're going to combine them both. But I still think if you're going to do one as a doctor, if you have limited time, you might as well just shoot for the expertise. What we found is this: there was this kind of relationship between the more people, the higher people scored on this complementary and alternative belief inventory, the more they believed in the disinformation, essentially. And what was interesting is those were the individuals who are less likely to reduce once they were exposed to these interventions as well.
Briony?
Yeah.
What is the, is that broccoli ice cream?
Broccoli ice cream. Deception.
Deception in the sense that, what is it representing? Sorry.
This is normally what I do in class to keep people interested if they don't care. But in my mind, when I was putting it on, it was like complementary and alternative medicine to me is often believing in a lot of things that don't really exist, like broccoli ice cream. But yes, it is just a ploy to keep entertained.
That's not disinforming, is it? I mean.
Exactly. Well, you got me. You got me. Yeah, good question though. Experiment 3, I decided to run it in a brand new population. I got half people who did not receive the COVID vaccine. This is at a time point when vaccines were wildly available. I switched the entire kind of vignette and story to be vaccine appropriate. It was very, very similar, just kind of vaccines, not cancer. And I did this for a couple of reasons. One is because the corrections to the misinformation by that point in time were really, really popular. Everyone had been trying to correct individuals. So I was like, ooh, this is going to be an interesting case for corrections when it's just saturating the public already. People are unlikely to believe in it with what we call like this information deficit model. So like you're unlikely to believe in it because you don't know the right answer, essentially. So I was like, correction is going to have a battle here. We'll see what happens. So essentially it was different in a couple of ways. One, this is the one where I included the conflicts of interest condition. This is like, I added a pre-test disinformation belief. So essentially I didn't say that the source said it yet, but I was like, here are some claims. How much do you think these are true or false? Because pre's are really important to be able to track that change. And I really wanted to, I was like, I love doing multiple studies because you get to kind of correct the things you regret. And I was like, this is the way I wish I'd done it to begin with. So you can actually track that trajectory. And I added a 1-week delay because I wanted to know, like, does this last? It doesn't really matter in the short term if people are like, oh, cool, I don't believe this now, but does it actually last over time? So what I found for this one, okay, so exact same way to read it. So higher is people believing in the disinformation more. What you see is in the black here, the control, you've got a little bump going on. Like this is immediate. So immediately after they read it, people are believing in the disinformation a little more. That's because it goes from neutral to, hey, this pretty reputable source has said these things. So we definitely had to like kind of correct for that in all of our analyses. But what's really interesting, you can see in the red, the controls, absolutely nothing. Nothing is happening whatsoever. I also want to highlight, this is only the unvaccinated population because they're the most interesting. I have some of the spare slides. I've got the vaccinated population. But conflicts of interest isn't really doing much. I think, again, it's kind of like significant but teeny effect size. What we really see here is low expertise in an unvaccinated population is still actually reducing belief, which is, in my field, kind of unheard of. The unvaccinated populations do not shift belief much at all. So I was actually thrilled. This is like small, but I was like, wow, we managed to shift these individuals on this measure. Didn't last over time. It did last over time in the unvaccinated population, but not in the, it lasted in the vaccinated population, but not in the unvaccinated. But even so, this was kind of bit of proof of concept that if your population know the corrections well, correcting, and I love corrections are my bread and butter, but it might not be your best tool if they're widely known. This is now source credibility for the unvaccinated population again. And what's so interesting is you can see on the corrections, it's just overlaying that control. There's no real difference between doing nothing and correcting people's disinformation for reducing source credibility. This did actually work very, very well in the vaccinated population, but it's not for everyone, I guess, in this case. What we see again is highlighting low expertise is like the best way. This is why the whole paper now is called The Advantages of Highlighting Low Expertise. And thankfully we got our second revise and resubmit, so hopefully this won't be a work in progress much longer last week. So it should be hopefully out within a couple of months. Again, we have this relationship with the complementary and alternative belief inventory. Again,
Briony,
yeah.
question on that. I mean, the unvaccinated population, their perceptions, maybe, are we assuming they're the same kind of sort of mindset as people who had alternative cancer therapies?
Question.
Because there's more of an anti-governmental or anti-authority dimension.
I think they correlate.
I imagine they correlate, but
Yeah, it's quite I think it's like 5 or 6 that they correlate.
I'm not surprised by it, but yeah.
So there's definitely an
tenacity.
association.
Yeah, the greater tenacity in that crowd would be
Absolutely.
explained by other things as well.
Yeah,
If they were just sort of alternative medicine types, it'd be a different,
for sure. And what's really interesting is that they are, I think, as you say, they're two groups, and they sometimes align and sometimes don't on various things.
Yeah.
What's so interesting about when my colleague did the study about who was using alternative medicine and who was actually had higher mortality rates, it was younger, more wealthy women. And those are often the same individuals who are these complementary alternative medicine crowd. But I do think they're different than the anti-government.
Yeah,
There's
curious
different
there.
pockets, no, for sure.
That would explain some of the greater tenacity.
Yes. So in sum, highlighting low expertise was equivalent or more effective than any other intervention. For source credibility, low expertise was consistently more effective than correcting disinformation and conflicts of interest conditions. And finally, participants who endorsed this complementary alternative medicines were less likely to reduce their belief and source credibility to the interventions. I can pause here. I was going to change to the new thing, but I can always hold questions till the end, or I can stop there.
Could I go back to my first question?
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
My first question. So you were doing this for NIH, and
Yes.
that's why you used the American sample.
That's right.
Have you thought about what you think the results would have been if you had been doing it, say, in Australia,
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. So my only cross-cultural study to date has actually been between the US and Australia. And it was a political study where I looked at, it was one of my few kind of source studies as well. So it's actually quite similar to this one. It was during my PhD. And I looked at, if you correct politicians' misinformation, how much people, reduce their belief in those claims, those misinformation, as well as do they change their voting intentions and feelings towards those politicians. And in the US, I used Trump and Sanders because I wanted these very political, polarizing figures. And it was I think study 1 was in 2015, and then study 2 was, I feel like it was the end of 2016. What we found was there was like no difference in voting intentions and feelings, like nothing. But people, including supporters of both politicians, reduced dramatically their belief in the claims. They're like, oh, that's not true. They totally updated their belief. But in terms of feelings and intentions, no, there was one condition where we looked at ratios. We weighted, they're like, this person's saying so much inaccurate information. Like there was like, it was like 4-1. And in that case, I use that as an example for like something that's statistically significant, but not meaningful, like on a 100-point scale. People just reduced, I think maybe like 2 points for their like feelings and intentions to vote. But you replicated that in Australia, huge differences. They really don't like politicians lying to them. It's really interesting. They're like, nope. We kind of theorized why. Maybe it's compulsory voting. Maybe it's, the voting system itself. Maybe it's the relationship between, maybe Americans also have less, I think, trust in political figures. So I'm like, well, maybe they expect them to lie more. Maybe that's, yeah.
More easily taken in.
Well, maybe they don't know. Yeah.
I'd love to hear the rest, but I thought this is so important because one of the seems to me the question of how steeped a population is in disinformation universes. So I would imagine the vaccine case, what you're battling is that you've done your correction, you've done your challenge to expertise, but they're still swimming in an ocean of disinformation that which you can't fight quite the same way, which is not quite the same, probably in the cancer situation, because the disinformation universe is not the same. I mean, it is, there's probably an alternative medicine religion out there that these people subscribe to, or some percentage of them subscribe to, which is different from the whole ideological. I mean, you need to pull them out of the soup in which they are already living.
I could not agree more. And I think that's a huge issue, is that especially like in the world I live in, which is like trying to think through how people come across information and process it. You come across so much information all the time. You're bombarded, and your like cognitive resources are just, you don't have the cognitive resources or motivation or effort or time in a day to think through everything and to fact check stuff. So absolutely.
I feel like that needs to be a piece of the investigation.
100%.
What what are you up against? Which would be
Yes.
this different depending upon what kind of misinformation
Oh,
you're
for sure.
talking about. The other thing that just to offer you this is that in the competition between corrected information versus challenges to expertise, what I hear is it's also Trumpian that people are more they're when you call someone a liar, when you prove they're a liar, I don't like a liar. I'm being like that there's something personal about the challenge to expertise that they're reacting to in a way that's ultimately has a better outcome. Whereas your better information and their worse information, well, it's the alternative facts. I have alternative facts that
Absolutely.
there's unless your credibility is somehow enhanced, there's no better reason to believe your truth than the truth they come in believing. So that, ad hominem
yes.
piece feels.
I think you totally nailed it, because this is I'll probably put this on my backup slide. We actually investigated what is happening with that low expertise condition, because we have that scale that is able to tease apart this trust and this expertise. And what we found was highlighting low expertise is pulling both down, your trust and your expertise down, because you're right. I think people are like, they're lying to me about their credibility. So that gets you at your trust. And then the credibility element pulls down the credibility as well. So I think it's two birds, one stone.
And the other question I had was about legal recourse. If someone lies about having a PhD in such and such from Berkeley, are they susceptible to a lawsuit from Berkeley?
I've never seen institutions.
Trying to bring
And
someone
no,
down who are
but-
implicated in.
You have to be really a terrible disinformation source to get sued. There's one thing that most disinformation sources in the health world get. The only thing I've seen them kind of get pulled up on is it's illegal to pose to being a doctor, and they, especially like if you're prescribing things, but it has to be really extreme. And there's like this one individual, oh my gosh, what's his name? That I just started an article using this person as an example, who's still doing it. It's been years, and he owes like, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in like, because he was found guilty of being fraudulent many years ago, but he's still doing it. So he's like getting brought back to the courts, but it's just like,
It's probably more lucrative to pay the fines than to.
yeah, it's really scary out there. And I think you're right that the different types of misinformation, I'm so used to political misinformation that getting into the health world has been very interesting, and it's still wildly politicized, you know? So like those combinations are really kind of a fascinating new problem, terrifying, but interesting. Costas, you had a question.
So thinking about your first couple of experiments for a moment further, it seems, if I understood it correctly, that some people, the people in the low expertise condition, were not informed that the information they got was false, right?
Correct.
That it was misinformation,
Correct.
disinformation. So on the basis of having been told that somebody was lying about one aspect of their identity, they made inferences about the information that they encountered,
Absolutely.
which may or may not have been accurate, right? Like you can have someone who lies about who they are and where they went to school, but still be giving you truthful information that you then
100%.
choose not to believe, just because you then make inferences about everything that person is telling you on the basis of that one piece of information, above and beyond the erosion in confidence in information, even after you've been told it's false, right? So I'm trying to understand what the human tendency is, what is the psychological tendency there?
I think it's just one of these like heuristics or these mental shortcuts. And if you, I think trust is so, I don't know, it's
Fundamental.
Okay, so let me just maybe ask the question different. Suppose you have perfectly like well credentialed people.
Yeah.
Who still choose to spread disinformation,
yes.
right? So now those are very dangerous people, because you can't really attack their credibility at all. They're legit. But
That's how I
there's-
conclude the article. Yeah,
Okay,
well done.
yeah.
Yeah, it's terrifying. You look at people like Andrew Wakefield, there's the doctor who published the very first, MMR causing autism. He's a real doctor. He looked legitimate. He had prior publications. I mean, that study itself was absolutely horrendously done, and there are many issues around that. But him as a source before that was very reputable. And I think like there are
Scary.
or reputable sources in general that spread inaccurate information, sometimes for financial gain, sometimes for other reasons, sometimes it's for power. And this suggests that this technique won't work. Like they are the most dangerous people. Sure. Yeah.
Would you go out on a limb and say something about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
Oh, yeah, he's an interesting case study.
It is because of the name, no comment.
Yeah,
Then he opens his mouth.
I definitely feel like the vaccine views there are questionable, but it's actually like not my research, but someone else has looked at like celebrity endorsement.
Right, that's where I was getting at, that he comes from a family of great prestige.
It's a huge problem because there's borrowed expertise. You're good at one thing, you must be good at other. Another good example is who's a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry who ended up pushing vitamin C for years and wrote books about it. And so we often talked about like, sorry,
Vitamin C.
Ryanite. Yes, thank you. That's exactly right. So we call this in the field like borrowed expertise. You know, you're an expert on one thing, but not necessarily on another, and they're also very, very persuasive.
It's interesting to Bill's point that the family went out and said, we disavow this guy.
People still believe that, yeah. Which is, I'm wondering, how does religion play into some of this? You know, I can think about, in my own personal experience, my mom's an evangelical. And some of the things that come out of their mouth, kind of like,
Right.
you know, I mean, are we on the same universe?
Right.
I mean, you see it right in front of your face, where you're believing otherwise, because then you deny you saw it.
Right. I'm often asked about religion, and I know some people to study it, and I think it's a very different type of belief. And I think that when faith is involved, it is a bit about believing without evidence. I think that's part and parcel of religion. I think where the conflict comes into it is when it's very clearly opposite of like scientific.
Exactly.
I think that's when it becomes a bit more challenging. Yeah, I don't know. I'm always a bit.
You say that within blocks of the Christian Science.
Yes, exactly. That's where my office is. Yeah.
Right next door.
So yeah.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that I do see the silver lining here, that people in the US still seem to care about expertise, which is
Especially in health.
fantastic. And yeah, I wonder if
Especially in
health,
health.
because it does affect them personally, like concretely, that maybe they're willing to care about expertise more.
What's so interesting is that why I couldn't wait to do this in health was because like doctors and nurses and medical scientists are still absolutely the top tier of trusted individuals, and politicians are like one step above used car salesmen.
Yeah.
So I was expecting after doing my first preliminary work and like with politicians that we'd get a really different, I'd love to replicate this with like political figures, because I think it's just absolutely hugely different worlds. But I agree. I think it's quite nice in a way that people are listening to these things.
Really.
And it'd also be interesting to see how, we talked about 2015 and 2016 in Trump.
Yes.
It would be interesting to replicate that now. to see how
Absolutely.
baked in or unbaked
Oh my gosh.
some of those beliefs are, because now you can actually see videos, you can see news clips of stuff that was said.
Yep.
Can you tell us about this?
I will. I'll go through it, because this is actually why I popped it in the work in progress is this is my final. This project's complete, but I have like one in the field at the moment. Like it's literally we're in between what we call like our time 1 and time 2. So my second version of this is like currently data is being collected. Okay. I think I can hopefully try and get through this in 10 minutes. Okay. So people often update their belief really, really well after a correction's been presented, but it never lasts over time, and we call this belief regression. So essentially, again, you've got a good old belief scale, go down, and then typically it goes back up, and not quite to the same point, but like a bunch of papers have found this, and I guess I was just wondering why this was, and it hasn't really been examined because the vast amount of research has just been done immediately in the correction world. And I love delays. That's part of my bread and butter, because I'm often like, does it matter if it lasts over like the next 30 seconds? I want to really, anyway. So my question is, why are people so happy to update their belief in the initial phase and then appear like they're not so sure a couple of weeks or a month or more later? So one mechanism is just memory. People just forgetting. Are they just like, you told me this was true, and you're like, no, I really didn't. It was false. So we call them the business failures to recollection could lead to this, and we we think of it like a little false tag. So if I say vaccines do not cause autism, the way you actually process it cognitively is like vaccines cause autism not. And then over time, this little not can fall off. And then that's essentially forgetting in action. And one kind of hint we have that this is the case is that older adults over 65 are more prone to belief regression than younger. Tiny amount, very small. So we wanted to know, are there occasions where people recall this false tag, but they still increase their belief in the misinformation? So people could be forgetting why the misinformation is false, or they could be like forgetting that it was from a reputable source. I label these individuals like dissenters, these people that accurately remember. They're like, yes, you did tell me that was false. I don't care. I still believe in this to be true. So I aim to investigate, well, what's the association between memory and belief regression? What is the exact amount of variance that memory accounts for? As well as, well, are people dissenting or are they just forgetting? So those were my 3 goals. Again, I had 600 people from this wonderful platform. I'm going to skip through. We essentially gave people a correction or we didn't. I had these 32 what we call items, which were half false or half were true. So we presented people with a bunch of different claims and we either said, these are true, these are false, here's why. So we essentially like gave people we said, how much do you believe this to be true? We then gave individuals this kind of correction saying this is false, here's why. And then we asked them a memory block. Can you remember whether we told you the statement was true and false? So that's really getting at something completely different than your belief. Yeah, so reminder, pretest, then some corrections. In the control group, we just didn't have the corrections. So you just had like a bunch of tests on your belief. No corrections at all. I'm gonna race through this. Okay, get to the fun part, results. So for the association between memory and belief, yeah, people did a really good job. They're all kind of down that. So this is memory. If they answer low, that means that they are remembering it to be false. If it's high, they're remembering it to be true. For belief, similarly, you've got like, if it's low, people are like, this is false. If it's high, they think it's true. So there's just a big floor effect here, but you can see it better in the delay, where pretty much there's a big association between what people remember to be true and false and what people believe to be true and false. And just to highlight, like, these are the people that are essentially getting it wrong. These are the people that are above 5 who are saying, hey, you told me this was true, and we believe it to be true. So we already knew just from that quick analysis, that there's a relationship here. We wanted to know the amount of variance that memory accounts for. And do let me know how I'm going for time if I need to stop. This is essentially the data here. You can see that per person, all the greens are reducing. So everyone is reducing and everyone's rebounding. It's like this is a really, really robust phenomenon compared to this control condition over there in the left. We had this like index, which counted for both the amount that something reduced as well as the amount that it rebounded. So it was this kind of clever way to account for both directions, which I will skip through. Essentially, lower number means more sustained belief. We found that memory at the delayed time point accounted for 66% of this belief regression, which is really, really strong. And then the kind of really fun results are here. So this is the bit I care about. So we've got like belief in immediate and post. So these individuals here are all getting it wrong. If you're in this space, is the only one I'm going to show you, you're getting it inaccurate. So you're saying, I believe this to be true, and I want to know why. So essentially, if we see an increase here, these are going to be individuals saying, I remember that you told me this was false, but I still believe this to be true. So these are the dissenters. If that moves up, means that there are people dissenting. This is the reason for belief regression. If it increases here, this means just forgetting. You told me this was true, so I believe it to be true. So this is kind of like, this little quadrant here would be like, tell us essentially what this is, what's going on. This was 7% of what we call the trials. This was 6, so no difference here. So people aren't dissenting more. What they are doing is they quadruple in the amount that they're forgetting. So essentially the whole purpose of the study is like, there's just memory. So in this new study I'm doing now, I'm doing a repeated correction after 2 weeks, because I really want to push it. I'm doing it with cancer misinformation as well. And I want to see that in the CAMBI users, that top kind of tertile, are they just memory? So I'm really trying to push this phenomenon and to see, like, for the individuals that really should hold their belief, is it all still just memory? And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Yes, any? Yeah.
In this last study, I'm wondering if you, in the more in-depth analysis, captured the optimism bias, that if people are told true things that affect themselves, they just willfully won't believe it because they think they're optimistic about their own prospects of
Yes, is
living
that
in.
Kali Shiro's work?
Yeah, Tally
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't. It was all pretty like non-relevant to themselves.
Okay, it's just like facts. And
What's fun about the new one is I have a question there about like how relevant cancer is to themselves. We might be able to test that in round 2. So, yeah,
I think that would be.
would be
I
really.
think I don't remember seeing anything in her study about how long the optimism lasted. Just sort of assumed to continue,
Yes.
but that would be a different source than necessarily forgetting, and just this kind of cognitive bias that we don't want to believe bad things.
For sure. I think that's a great idea. I don't think I've seen much of her work have these delays either. So, right. Yeah. Interesting.
Thank you so much. It was really quite interesting, the bot studies. My comments are also about the need to repeat the same message again and again. And, being a parent, you know that quite well. I think it's also how propaganda works. We know that the part of propaganda is basically getting you all this information. And I think
Absolutely.
that's part of, and also people are more likely to forget what they have cognitive dissonance. If I don't agree, I'm going to, even if I know, I'm going to forget that.
Those are both important puzzles, important pieces of the puzzle. For repetition, especially if it's not paired with the correction, it's called the illusory truth effect. So people are far more likely to believe in a piece of misinformation if it's repeated. The effect size is always quite small, but it's really, really robust. So that's certainly, both of those things are true. I agree. Yeah.
There was an ethicist column, which I'm devoted to in the New York Times recently, about a doctor who has a parent who was like an evangelical or something, and who was, endlessly promoting misinformation. And, the ethical question was like, what do I do with my mother? And do I, and the ethicist was like, the ethicist classified it as religious conviction. The parents, that you have to think about it as a kind of religion. And what do you do when you have a different, or when you can't abide, how do you, it was about managing the social relationship. And,
Oh my gosh, yes.
and that was what I kept thinking, listening to you, is that so much of this probably has to do with the company you keep.
That's so
And
true.
which has everything to do with what your sources of information are, and how, and how impassioned they are, and how, what else they're linked to in terms of, so, I'm wondering about things like, you highlighted trust, but I think fear is probably another huge factor to,
Absolutely.
factor in.
Fear is a big thing to sell in this industry. But I think you're right, especially like personal relationships. These things have changed, I think, especially in the polarized nature of particularly in America. And then everyone has friends and families from, across the aisle. And I think that sometimes correcting misinformation isn't what people are after. You know, sometimes like just maintaining these social relationships is more important than like having them believe the truth. So even as a kind of correction specialist, I'm always like, I have to correct everything.
Right, but how much the need for community feeds people's living in universes that are so destructive.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, I've got a thing.
No, absolutely. I think those are such valid points.
My other kind of question was about not correcting things, because they say some of the studies I was reading, and actually we're told if we're going to give a talk, never to start with this is not true, because that's what people are going to remember.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be my third thing. Okay, there's something called the backfire
Yes,
effect,
yeah.
and it's not true. You don't have to worry about it.
Oh, it's not true. Huh?
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. That was my third. But essentially, it doesn't happen. It's all
Yeah.
measurement error.
Oh, I see.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because what's there was this I think it's in Sweden, has
done that
the
one.
Center for Psychological Security, and they're saying it that their job is not, they don't actually correct things. They're
Oh my
just
gosh.
saying,
Please
what's
send
the
them my
right
way.
information.
I have 2 publications on this, and it's one of my biggest beefs is that people think that
Yeah.
corrections backfire.
Right. Okay.
And we've never been able to.
Correct.
Yes. So
Say
correct
it's
away,
wrong.
correct away. No one should be afraid of correcting things. And also we've looked into different formats, like is it better to start with the truth? Is it better to start with misinformation? Does that impact anything? Doesn't make any
Oh,
difference.
really? Oh.
Yeah. Send you some papers.
Okay, well, tell Northeastern people, because I don't remember, we had that a couple of years ago, how to talk to media.
Oh, is it the media people? I should
Yeah,
tell
the media people tell them, yeah, because they have a workshop for us. And
Yeah, no, it's been floating around the media for a while. I mean,
Well, even those of us who teach writing and rhetoric are taught to don't say,
it's all the articles on backfire that I clipped.
Oh, wow.
It's a rumor that gift that keeps on giving.
Right.
Yeah,
I see,
it doesn't happen.
okay.
huh,
I don't know if I have anything we can. Blah, blah,
that's
blah,
cool.
blah, blah.
I like the baby.
I often put that on the screen when I'm like talking to policy people, showing like in the field of misinformation, we don't know anything. Essentially, the only thing that made any difference was what's called reliability. How do I define it? So this is like the degree to which a measure is consistent. So it's all statistical noise, essentially. But this is why people we're finding it in the literature.
Right.
It doesn't exist yet. It theoretically exists.
It's because in rhetoric studies, we're told to say, if you're complaining to a company, the iron is always cold, not to say the iron won't heat up.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
you're not supposed to use the negative, I just, right, I did that wrong
So funny.
myself, but you start,
That was great. I'm sorry. I have
Thanks
to
for
run.
coming.
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, that you're supposed to make all of your declarations in the affirmative, that those are more powerful and effective than
That's been
negations.
tested. I love taking these assumptions and testing them.
It's fun, it's kind of funny, it's in my culture where I come from, we always start with no, because I for some reason, I think here people don't say no, so I always think there is hope. Here says, I don't think so, instead of saying no, but
Comments online. Oh, it's also probably time to
Mm.
stop this.
No, you are.
I think that would be interesting to look at these different cultural kind of norms.
Absolutely, absolutely,
it's kind of
for sure.
happening.
Just people talking.
Just thank you.
Oh, thank you online people. Bye.
Oh, wow, it's seven people online, that's great.
No, for sure. I
This
think
was
it's really cultural.
wonderful. I
you
really
for
think
having
it's
me.
such important work and, what's more important than figuring out how to at least develop some kind of consensus about what's true and
Agreed.
helpful
It's tough
and
these days. It doesn't make it
I
easy.
know
for
it's this, do you look at all at at technology, like the media?
Yeah, I do a lot of social media. I've got some very talented computer science collaborators. So I kind of work with them on some.
Now, that seems so important because there's been such a sea change there.
Right.
And also the intersection with religion, I think would be a really important,
No.
you know, in two ways, religious people, that is evangelicals,
Yes.
like are their communities more inclined to believe and spread misinformation? But also people who are believers, period.
Yeah.
Do they have a different psychology because they're already trusting in something for which there is no evidence?
Right. So,
Like it's a habit of mind to, you know,
I believe it, yeah,
like, well, you know, it's a matter of faith
right,
kind of thing.
right. Or maybe that they might be also less more resistant to corrections if they're used to developing their faith internally and being like,
Right.
I'm not gonna listen to.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So interesting.
I suspect it's not the case, actually, but I'd be curious if it were.
Oh, yeah, I think it's gonna be really cool.
Well, that's denial, you know, you just don't want to know the truth because sometimes people don't want to know the truth.
Yeah,
Knowing the truth is hard.
yeah,
Knowing the truth
it's
is
my
hard.
favorite river.
Thank you so much.
I learned so much.
Fun.